Okay. So, I think I'm supposed to do this 1 second. Okay. So this week's Torah portion is Bahalotra, which we're going to read a bit about. And there are a couple of very interesting anecdotes, historical anecdotes and insights in the Torah portion. We're not going to deal with any of them. We're going to, as which is often the case here, but we're going to start off. I want to take a look so we can show at least an overview of what we're not talking about today. Look at the Parsha overview. Let me get this out of the way. Good morning. Or isn't to be sorry. You have a seat set for you. So your advance party took care of you. Okay. So it says, Aaron is commanded to raise light. They use the term raise light because the Torah uses that idea. It means to kindle lights, to kindle lights, kindle candles in the lamps of the menorah. And the tribe of the Levites, Levi, is initiated into the service in the sanctuary. That's the beginning of the Torah portion. Then the Torah portion goes to another historical, and yet remember, where we are in the Torah is almost a year from when they received the Torah. It's already past the first anniversary of their exodus from Egypt. So there's something which we have discussed in the past months. A second Passover is instituted in response to the petition. Why should we be deprived? A group of Jews who are unable to bring the Passover offering, and this is the first Passover offering which is a pursuant to the actual Exodus in its appointed time because they were ritually impure. God instructs Moses on the procedures for Israel's journeys and campings in the desert. They're about to, after almost a year in the Sinai desert at the Mount Sinai, they're about to break camp, and they get instructions on how to journey, how to encamp in the desert. And the people journey in formation from Mount Sinai, where they had been camped for nearly a year. So this week's Torah portion, at least now we have moving on. People are dissatisfied with their bread from heaven, the manna, and demand that Moses supply them with meat. Moses appoints 70 elders, to whom he imparts of his spirit to assist them in the burden of governing the people. Miriam speaks negatively. Moses, good morning, and is punished with leprosy. Moses prays for her healing, makes of her own, and the entire community waits 7 days for her recovery. And I mentioned before, we're going to touch none of these ideas, but there is something that would probably pique your interest if you're sitting in Shul Shabbos. Many of us will remember that when you're in synagogue and we open the ark to take out the Torahs, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, any day of the week, we chant. You may recognize a tune by He been so around. Excuse my voice. That's universally for thousands of years. Whenever we open the ark, that's what we do. What is that verse? That verse literally, and we'll have it here. I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up before we get into it. That verse means Vayihi bin Soa Aaron means that when the ark would travel, okay, and we're going to be up to actually, something. Well, we're going to get to it in 107. I just want to give a little bit of an overview before we get into it. When the ark would travel, because we're talking about the Jews traveling, they've been camped for almost a year. They haven't moved. They came out of Egypt. They traveled 7 weeks to get to Sinai, actually 6 weeks to get to the Sinai desert. And then they're there. And they're with the mountains right in front of them. And there as they are, that's when they have the saga with the golden calf, and they get the second tablets, and they build the tabernacle, and they dedicate the tabernacle, all the stuff. We're up to the 4th book of the Torah. And we really have hardly moved off a dime from the 2nd book of the Torah. It's chronologically. And we're going to have to speed up things really fast because it's at the end of the fourth book. It's already 40 years into the desert. So we're missing 38 years of what happened in the history. But what happened? Since they're moving, it says that when they would move, in the center of the people of the encampment, there would be the Ark of the Covenant. They had wagons where all the things from the tabernacle was a collapsible tabernacle. It was a temporary structure. So they would have to collapse it and put it up. When they camped, they'd have to put it up. When they moved, they had to put it down. They had these big wagons where they moved with it. You had the Levites who were functionaries. They were taking things on and off and moving with the wagons. And in the center is the Ark of God. What's in the Ark? There's the tablets of the commandments. There's the remnants of the first tablets. It's the cherubim. That's the center of our holiness. So Vayihi bin Soha Aaron means when the ark would be traveling, because it was sitting stationary, sometimes for years at a time in the desert, and it was a centerpiece of the tabernacle. Now when it's moving, Vayomer Moshe, Moses would say, Kuma Hashem, arise, O God. God doesn't sit, but God, make yourself known. The Yafutzu Oivecha, and may your enemies be scattered. The Yanusu Misanecha Mipanecha, and they translate it as foes. It could be foes, it could be combatants, well, actually, foes is the first one. That would be the first one, more combatants. This next one is those who hate you. Those who hate you should be dispersed from before you. So what Moses would say, and what we repeat, whether we're aware exactly of what we're saying or not, is we talk about the idea of people who are combatants of God, whatever that means, or adversaries, and then or even those who hate God. That's what the Torah talks about. So I guess what we're going to talk about today is, what does that mean? Why should someone hate God? And we're going to see that this is linked up with hating Jews. But let's start from the beginning. Text 1 and 107. Okay. So it was. Again, this the verse that I just translated, that when we open the Torah, to open the ark, it says, whenever the ark set out, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, and may your foes be scattered." And again, it could be those who are fighting against you, call them foes, and may those who hate you flee from you. And that is a very clear translation. Now, first, let's talk. It seems repetitious a little bit. So, one to distinguish between what they're calling foes, or those who fight against you, or your adversaries, whatever, or assailants, and then those who hate you. So, we're going to go to a great rabbi of the 1700s, and he says the word "sone," which means in Hebrew to hate, so is a hater. That's one who harbors hatred in their heart and does not reveal it. And Oyev reveals their hatred. So before we get to that, what's the difference between a combatant and someone who hates you? A combatant doesn't necessarily hate you. I'm hoping that people just take it to where we are now. To my knowledge, Israeli kids are not raised to hate Arabs. They're raised to be good Jews or good Israelis and to care for people, and that whether they're Arab or Muslim or Hindu or whatever it is, and to watch their back against people who hate them. As we know, and we've known for a long time, some people are raised to hate Jews, right? Not only in Gaza. It's part of the curriculum. It's like, I don't know, I guess it's you teach kids, if you have 3 Jews and you kill 2, how many are left? That's math curriculum, literally. I mean, it gets into the head. So the idea of, I would hope that members of the IDF are not Arab haters. They're fighting because they need to fight to protect themselves. The way to peace is, if Hamas lays down its arms or destroys their arms, there's peace. There's no need to do it for anything else. Israel lays down its arms, they're dead. So here, it was the idea that one hates is not necessarily synonymous with the fact that someone's a combatant. A combatant might just be looking for survival. The hater might not be a combatant. They're just harboring it within them, right? We saw after October 7th, people come out of the woodwork and say, "We didn't know you hated us so much." They weren't doing it. They weren't running after us on October 6th. Got an excuse to come out, but it wasn't that they were combatants, but there was a deep-seated hatred. Aside from the use of labels, I'm talking about people who actually hate. A sone, it says, this is a hater, is one who harbors hatred in their heart and does not reveal it. And Oyev reveals their hate. The combatant reveals their hatred, or at least their desire, in some desire to kill. And Oyev actively seeks to harm their enemy. So this is the practical assailant, who may not really hate you so much. It's just they hate the fact that you're trying to kill them. But a sone, a hater, rejoices when their enemy is harmed. It doesn't necessarily actively do harm. So there are people on the sidelines who are not maybe engaged in active acts of hatred, but they can't stand the object of their hatred. And if they see something that they think accrues to the negativity, to the harm of the object of their hatred, they're happy. Instead, they guard the hatred in their hearts. In other words, they're walking around with it. It's the resentment. Doesn't mean necessarily that they're an active combatant. Now, we're talking about both of those with God. And here they have a little figure, an ideological enemy and a practical enemy. The ideological enemy is what we're facing in Gaza. And the practical enemy. Maybe some of the kids on campus are practical enemies. They don't even know what they got swept into. They're waving Hamas flags, which make them certainly be somewhat ideological combatants, but they don't know which river and which sea, and they're not sure what a Jew is, or maybe they're Jewish themselves, and it's not necessarily coming from hatred. Some anyway. But now let's look at Rashi. Rashi is the primary commentary on the Torah. On this verse, it says, "Those who hate you." How could it be people hate God? What does that mean? We think people walk around. Every time the ark moved, every time we open the ark, we bring this thing, we talk about people who hate God. It means God. Rashi tells us, those who hate you means those who hate the people of Israel. For anyone who hates the people of Israel, hates the one who spoke and the world came to being, hates the Creator. As it says, as a verse says, those who hate you have raised their heads. And the verse in Psalms continues to define who are those who hate you? Those who, as the verse continues, plot deviously against your nation. So Rashi brings proof from a verse that there's a conflation of these two. That hating Jews means hating God. But why does that logically compute? Faithful Christians today, they're not fighting with us, but you're talking about for many, many years, when we were suffering terribly at the hands of the church, they love God. The devout Christians, but they're killing us. I'm going to say, actually, you hate God because you hate me. Maybe they hate me. The Muslims even more so. They're very devout. Muslims are frum. They're very connected to God. So they hate Jews but why, how does Rashi, where does he see that dovetailing? Yes, the verse says it, so we accept it. That's a Torah understanding. But what is that understanding? What does it mean that hating Jews somehow is linked to hating God? So now let's get into a little bit into anti-Semitism, what it is. This is a quote from a famous historian of the first century. His name was Tacitus. Tacitus is quoting the writings of an Egyptian priest named Manetho, who published around in the 3rd century before the Common Era what Bibi Netanyahu's father, who was an academic, a historian, he called the first piece of published anti-Semitism. What does he say? Once during a plague in Egypt, this Roman is writing, which caused bodily disfigurement, King Bocchus approached the oracle of Ammon. Ammon is an idolatry, and asked for remedy. Whereupon he was told to purge his kingdom and to transport this race, which means the Jews, into other lands, since it was hateful to the gods. Okay, so right away, you have some of the classic things we found in history. Number one, that if there's a plague, who's to blame? Jews. Second of all, that we are, as a race, we're a problem to society, and God hates us. So the Hebrews were searched out together and gathered together, then being abandoned in the desert, while all others lay idle and weeping. One only of the exiled, Moses by name, warned them not to hope for help from gods or men, for they were deserted by both, but to trust to themselves. Okay, this, obviously that's not our version of what went on, and ours won out. But this is the way they're reading what happened when we left Egypt. Now we get in, Tacitus gets into the Jews a little bit. The Jews regard as profane all that we hold sacred. On the other hand, they permit all that we abhor. Another Jewish thing, one of the classic canards of Jews about Jews. Haman said the same thing. They're different. They think differently. What we hold as sacred, they don't like. What they like, we don't like. They first chose to rest on the 7th day, but after a time they were led by the charms of indolence, which means laziness, to give over the 7th year as well to inactivity, because we have the 7th year is the land lies fallow. So Jews are being accused of being lazy. Parasites on society, doesn't say that, but you see where it's going. Then the other customs of Jews are base and abominable, and owe their persistence to the depravity. For the worst rascals among their other peoples, renouncing their ancestral religions, always kept sending tribute and contributions to Jerusalem, thereby increasing the wealth of the Jews. So we're lazy, but we're loaded. Lots of money. Another classic approach to why I hate the Jews. Again, the Jews are extremely loyal toward one another. There's something nice. And always ready to show compassion.
Turn the text to 5, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for reminding me. I have to read from here. The other customs of the Jews are based on abominable and owe their persistence to the depravity. For the worst rascals among other peoples, renouncing their ancestral religions, always kept sending tribute and contributions to Jerusalem, thereby increasing the wealth of the Jews. Again, the Jews are extremely loyal toward one another, which is certainly a compliment, and always ready to show compassion, which is also a compliment, but that's not a compliment because it's only the preface to saying toward every other people they feel only hate and enmity. Jews hate non-Jews. That's another big one.
Sounds more like a Bubba Meiser with a lot of projection thrown in.
Yeah, we've had this Bubba Meiser going on for several thousand years. I think we found this is the earliest published one of it, but you can see this is the stuff that made it through itself into Germany too. And it is all the same canards. They persist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this is something from a great rabbi who was shot in the Warsaw Ghetto. His name is Rabbi Menachem Zemba. He's very well known and respected, and he wrote. Remember, he lived in the Warsaw Ghetto. He lived through the beginnings of Nazism and when they conquered Poland. And he writes, there are those who seek to identify legitimate causes for the hatred of Jews. However, reality has shown that there is no legitimate reason. Anti-Semitism has no justifiable cause. The haters simply choose to hate God's people. Here's an interesting idea. He says, and this is a great Talmud scholar. Number one, he says, is there's hatred. Then people like to try to understand hatred. Maybe when you ask them, you hate John? Why do you hate John so much? Maybe people for themselves, they don't want to feel that's just blind hatred. They want to be able to legitimize and say, it's not that I just hate, it's because of A. Were it not for A, I wouldn't hate. He says, as a preface, he's going to go further. What he says is that anti-Semitism actually has no cause. It's hatred in search of a legitimization. It's not a cause. Usually, if there's an idea, if you see something one way, if you look at something and say, oh, this would be good for me, you want it. You like it. You look and say, this is bad for me, you don't want it. Something hurts you, you don't like it. Something helps you, you like it. There's a cause and an effect. And the emotions are usually an effect, an outgrowth of some stimulus. What we're saying is here, as far as the hatred, it's there. They're looking to justify it with a stimulus, which doesn't make it's not there. But he does say something. He gives a stimulus. They choose to hate God's people. And I think he's insinuating, we'll talk more about it, it's the fact that so many people, if you think about it, 2 billion Muslims recognize and respect our Torah as the basis for their religion. They call it in Arabic the Torah. That is, then they come along and say, you screwed it up, and then God spoke to Muhammad, he switched things around a little bit, but it's clearly an outgrowth of Judaism. It's 2 billion Catholics, 2 billion Muslims, 1.5 billion Catholics, the same, called the Old Testament, 1 billion Protestants. You got already, forget the Jews, you got 4.5 billion people, that's already more than half the planet, believes in the Torah. They say, well, it got eclipsed. We've got a more modern application of it, but none of them are saying the Torah is baloney. That means 4.5 billion people believe and do not deny that God gathered the Jewish people at Mount Sinai and said, I want to give you the Torah, and I want you to be my treasured nation of ambassadors of monotheism and decency to the world. They're not denying that. Our greatest haters in Islam are not going to deny that. They will say, we messed up and therefore God chose Islam. But later, in other words, he got everyone together to say, I chose them, and then privately in a cave to Muhammad or on the road to Damascus, God changed his mind. That's the belief. But many, many people have been taught and believe at some level that God spoke to the Jewish people. There was that initial, if you freeze frame history, that happened. And maybe that's a problem people have. Subconsciously. Now, but let's continue with the Rabbi Nachman. But it does say they simply choose to hate God's people. Now he goes further to demonstrate how irrational this all is. This is demonstrated by the fact that Jews are hated for being capitalists and also for being socialists. It doesn't make sense. They are hated because they're overly ambitious and sharp-minded, and also because they're burdensome and parasitic. They're hated because they're too religious and conservative. They're also hated because they advance progressive and secular ideas. The reasons for this hatred are consistently contradictory and have not an ounce of logic behind them. I probably still have in my files something that must be 30 years ago. I was living here already. There was a New York magazine. It said the cover piece was either why hate the Jews or why anti-Semitism, and there was an in-depth study where they had polled people who admitted to feeling anti-Semitic feelings, and they asked them reasons, and it was like maybe 40 questions, but the questions were actually contradictory. Like question 2 and question 38 was, do you think they're all rich? And 38 is, do you think they're poor? And it was yes to both of them. Do you think that they're clannish? Or do you think that they infiltrate everything? Yes to both of them. Yes.
There's an article this morning
Yeah.
in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency about Emma Goldman and her lawyer and how she and the anarchists were used to justify the immigration quotas that were imposed in 1924.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay. Thank you. So this is the idea is that there isn't a reason to. When I was in Russia, the first time, well, I think probably the first or second time I was in Russia, I was there during when it was communism was still it went in 89, went in the end of 88 and then 89 and 90, but there was still communism, but glasnost was beginning, perestroika was beginning. Part of perestroika beginning was, and glasnost beginning was that anti-Semitism came out, because in Moscow, my first 2 months probably, no one said, there was no overt anti-Semitism. The only overt anti-Semitism was allowed to come from the government. You weren't allowed to express an opinion, even if it was anti-Semitic. Everything was gray. Once freedom of expression began, all of a sudden the anti-Semites came out. Now we can say we hate Jews. What was interesting was in Minsk, there were signs out there that killed the Jews and the capitalists. And the same day in Moscow, there were signs that killed the Jews and the communists. Like, whoever we don't like, tack on the Jews. This is what Rabbi Zemba is saying. If you look for a rationale, you're going to be disappointed, because it may seem like a rationale, but you dig a little deeper, you see it's not that, because if you change it, they're going to hate you anyway. The other side, you think they hate capitalists, but they love communists? They're not going to love communists either. They hate you, and whoever you are, they're going to hate. And this, we have the Medrash told this to us many thousands of years ago. Medrash tells us that a Jew passed, this is text 6 of 111, a Jew passed before Hadrian, the emperor, and greeted him. The emperor asked him, "Who are you?" He answered, "A Jew." He said, "A Jew should pass before Hadrian and greet him? You lowlife, you think you get this to greet the emperor? Take him and cut off his head." Another Jew was passing by, seeing what had happened, and did not greet the emperor. That's stupid. See what happened to the first guy, said hello. You just walk by and keep your keep your eyes on the ground and keep walking. The emperor asked him, "Who are you?" He answered, "A Jew." What does Hadrian said? He said, "A Jew passes before Hadrian and not greet him? Cut off his head." Which is obviously absurd. So his senator said to him, "We don't know what you're doing. One Jew you killed for greeting you, the other Jew you killed for not greeting you. What do you want him to do?" He replied, "Are you trying to tell the king what to do about those he hates? Just leave it to me. I'm finding reasons to substantiate my hatred in my head, but don't try to rationalize it." He himself is saying, "What are you trying to rationalize?" And here we're going to move on text 7 to a very profound and I guess somewhat prescient piece from Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs. Is just an incredibly brilliant leader of our times, unfortunately passed away over COVID. And he wrote this in 2007. He writes, anti-Semitism is not an ideology, a coherent set of beliefs. It is, in fact, an endless stream of contradictions. The best way of understanding it is to see it as a virus. Viruses attack the human body, but the body itself has an immensely sophisticated defense, the human immune system. So how then do viruses survive and flourish? By mutating. They adapt. And a virus does because it sees the defense system, and then it mutates, it adapts itself to be able to make it through the defense system, the body's defense system. So too, anti-Semitism mutates. Anti-Semitism, there's hatred. The reason for our hatred is no longer valid. Oh, no problem. We have a Rolodex. We'll change to another reason. It does work. It adapts. It mutates. And in so doing, defeats the immune system set up by cultures to protect themselves against hatred. Forget about the low lives in a culture. In a culture, there are people who want to do the right thing. There are nice people. Where, especially since the civil emancipation in the 1700s, at least, you want to see human beings as human beings. How do we get to a tolerance of a hatred of anti-Semitism? So there's an immune system we have against it. We don't like hate. We don't like bias. We don't like bigotry. Us Americans, generally speaking, I'm not talking about individuals, generally speaking, the culture despises it. You hear someone saying, I don't like that person because of his color or because of his religion. It's abhorrent. We don't stand for that. So how is it anti-Semitism has to mutate in order to penetrate the immune systems, in other words, conceptual immune systems set by cultures to protect themselves against hatred? Most people at most times feel a residual guilt at hating the innocent. We don't want to hate the innocent. Do you hate an innocent Arab for being Arab? An innocent Muslim? If there's truly an innocent Muslim, someone who's not, what's there to hate? Therefore, anti-Semitism has always had to find legitimation in the most prestigious source of authority at any given time. So smart anti-Semitism has to look and find within the accepted authorities of our culture, say, here is a reason to hate the Jews. So in the first centuries of the Common Era and in the Middle Ages, this was religion, even well before 1700s. There were people even back then when it was more of a jungle. Assume there were some people who understood it's not nice to just hate an innocent person. So no, but our religion says to hate them. That's okay. That's why Judeophobia took the form of religious doctrine. And we had a lot, right? Martin Luther wrote horrible things about the Jews. The Catholic Church wrote horrible things about the Jews. So you look and say, listen, it's nothing personal, but this is what my religion says. Racial anti-Semitism. I'm sorry. In the 19th century, religion had lost prestige, and the supreme authority was now science. So now in the 1800s, where people aren't so blind about their religion, many of them. So now we're scientific. Well, scientifically, we got a problem. Racial anti-Semitism was duly based on two pseudosciences: social Darwinism, the idea that in society as in nature, the strong survive by eliminating the weak, which is something of a Hitlerian approach. For the sake of society, we got to get rid of this race. They're an infection. It was pseudoscience and the so-called scientific study of race. So this was not Hitler's approach, at least not on the face of it. It was not a religious one. It was racial and intelligent, academic. There's something wrong with the Jews. You have to amputate a diseased limb. And we have to amputate this limb, God forbid, from society. By the late 20th century, science had lost its prestige, having given us the power to destroy life on Earth. Today, the Supreme Court of legitimacy is human rights. That is why Jews or the Jewish state are accused of the 5 primal sins against human rights. He's writing this in 2007. I don't think he knew how resonant it would be in 2024. Racism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, attempted genocide, and crimes against humanity. That's the biggest insult, the biggest smear you can give to a person or to a race, is to say, this is a race that is bigoted. This is a race that exercises apartheid and genocide. And that's exactly what they're doing. We see it now. Again, it's not about what's going on now, but why does it survive? How could it be that people in New York City are able to walk, demonstrate in front of a Nova exhibit? A Nova exhibit memorializing a horrible butchering only a few months ago of innocent Jews, and waving Hamas flags, saying things like, where's Hitler? We need him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if, God forbid, Ku Klux Klan would demonstrate in front of Martin Luther King's birthplace and say something about bringing anti-black or bringing back slavery? They would shut that down in a minute, and they should. But when you frame this, which they've cleverly done, and say that this is really, it's not about Jews, it's anti-genocide. We are standing up for the vulnerable. This isn't about bashing Jews, it's about caring for the oppressed in Gaza. All of a sudden, we're frozen. Because, as he says, that's the greatest source of legitimacy. One of the 5 primal sins. So this is what we're experiencing. We've been experiencing. This just happens to be the latest mutation. But I think we all know that this isn't about. This is about Israel, and it's not just about Zionism. Zionism and Judaism and Jews are indistinguishable. At this point, from this perspective, they mean Jews, they mean us. And now they found a current way of supporting this, because the racial one's not working anymore. The religious one's not working anymore. God willing, we'll make it past this. They're going to try to find something else in their Rolodex. The point is, though, there isn't a real reason for it. But we do mention that, remember, Menachem Zemba in text 5 mentioned that when his language was, the haters simply choose to hate God's people. So remember, Rashi, the primary commentary in the Torah, when talking about why is it, when the ark moves and we open the ark, we call the people haters of God. It says it means they're haters of Jews, and being hater of Jews means hating God. So there is this conflation of God and the Jewish people. So let's try and understand a little better. This is okay. From Rabbi Ben Zion Schaefer. I have to admit, I don't know who he is, but he wrote an article called "Why We Hate the Jews." The pattern that he's a current person. The pattern that emerges is that there's no logical reason for anti-Semitism until you focus on the real cause, that the Jew represents Hashem. The Jew represents God. There is a conflation between the Jew and God. We are Hashem's people. When the Gentile looks at a Jew, the Jew sees God, and he's saying, and that image is not always attractive to him. Okay, this is, again, Rabbi Schaefer's perspective. I'm not sure 100% what he means by that, but I think that to take off on that, there is, again, at least for 4.5 billion people, there is this historical thing, no matter how much the Jews misbehave and all the other stuff, there is this scene that everybody's seen, Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments. We all know that God and the Jewish people is something that's special that went on there. And that can be irksome. Now, let's take a look at the Mendy in text 9. Moses said to God, Master of the universe, had we been Gentiles, idol worshippers, or deniers of the mitzvot, they wouldn't have hate us or persecute us. It's only on account of the Torah mitzvahs that you gave us that they hate us. So here there's a reason given. Why should someone hate me that I wear tefillin? Why should someone hate me that I wear yarmulke? Why should that bother anybody? Yet Moses himself said, this is connected to you, God. It's because of what we're doing, things that represent our loyalty to you. And even if we don't do those things, people know a Jew is a Jew. Haman, they don't bring it here, but Haman, when he explained to the king of Persia why to kill the Jews. What does the scroll of Esther tell us? It said there's this people, they are different. Their behaviors are different. It's not just dislike of the unlike, which is also a thing that goes on. It seems much deeper. There's this idea of, we have this idea of Torah, and this is this relationship with God, which may have, you look and say, listen, we misbehaved. The golden calf, we lost the temple. You can make a very long thesis about times that Jews did not follow the laws. I don't think anyone is upset about that. It's the fact that somehow this was done, we're connected to God, and we're not going away. Again, just the idea, and one can see it. I don't know that much about. I haven't read that much about Muslim, about Quranic writings. I've read a lot about Muslims, but not of Quranic writings. But in Christian writings, the idea that the Jew has to be despised because this is part of the proof. If God chose to give them the Torah, and then chose to, according to Christianity, reject them, we have to see the rejection. Because if we don't see the rejection, our whole case falls away. Even during World War II, when they were hoping to eradicate everyone, there were Jews who were protected, called the Pope's Jews. You can read about it online, I'm sure. The Pope's Jews had to be protected because for the second coming, you needed Jews to stand up, to testify we were wrong. It's a big deal to them. And us walking around as Jews, not saying, yeah, you're right, we're still Jews, it's a thorn a theological thorn in the side. I'm sure it's of Islam too. I'm only speculating because I haven't seen that. Text 10.
Rob, just a question. Are you entertaining questions and comments now, or
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, I'm married to a Gentile, and she is the love of my life. So I think you know that, and
I do.
I'll just state that up front. But I
You're
have,
putting out your street cred.
what's that?
You're just putting out your street cred.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm putting it out or I'm pouring water on it. I don't know, but
Okay.
I've long been fascinated with the relationship of the birth of Christianity in the first 2 or 3 centuries of the Common Era, and in its relationship with Judaism. And I just read a couple of books by a wonderful scholar, and I don't remember her name. She's at Duke, and she's quite accomplished. But she has done some great research into how the Christian Bible and Christian theology have practically totally denied the Jewishness of Yeshua, and that
Jesus.
Jesus was a Jew, and it's our tradition to have disputations and arguments and discussions without hating each other, just trading points of view and trying to understand. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. That's our tradition. And so the discussions and complaints that Jesus had as set forth in the Christian Gospels can be interpreted very easily as a Jew arguing about halakha and about the meaning of halakha, not about halakha, because there's evidence that Jesus wasn't disputing the law. He was disputing what it means and how to carry it out and how to live in daily life and as a Jew. And
Absolutely.
what Christians want to deny is that he was Jewish, that he really was he was actually born somehow a Christian already, or a non-Jew, or a hater of Jews. He was born, disputing the whole idea of Jewishness and of the law and of a relationship with Hashem, and because he was Hashem, so you can't worship two gods, either it's my way, and so he was interpreted. He was given words in the Christian Bible, either it's my way or the highway. Basically, the road to eternal life is through me. That's what he's quoted as saying in the Christian gospel. So that's a total denial of how a Jew thinks and what a Jew believes, and there's a whole nother way of looking at it, which this scholar spent years and years. She was, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering her name, but she has spoken to interfaith conferences, academic conferences all over the world, including at the Vatican, and she's a renowned and respected scholar and a Jew. She's
a Jew?
What's that?
She's a Jew?
Oh yeah, she's a Jew. And
Okay.
her basically her doctoral thesis and pretty much her whole professional academic life has been reconstructing the life of Jesus as a Jew.
He certainly was, and we'll move forward with this, but I mean, I'm not qualified as a scholar of the New Testament, but
I'm not asking you to judge one way or the other or to comment, but
yeah.
Among her points is that there was a great deal of redaction and editing after the death of whoever this guy was that was strung up on a cross by the Romans, which was a normal way of execution in Roman times.
Yeah.
As particularly as Roman reign got more and more violent, but there was an enormous effort at redaction and of turning this teacher, whoever he was, away from his Jewish roots to something quite different.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'd say that we'll move forward with this now, but I think that's definitely well taken. I think that even from what wasn't redacted, it's very clear that Jesus was a Jew. He wanted to speak to Jews. He didn't want to deal with Gentiles. He was dealing only with Jews. There's something in the New Testament unredacted where about to the Samaritans. He said he doesn't want to throw the bread of the children to the dogs, because the Samaritans weren't Jewish. The idea of even engaging the non-Jewish world came from Paul. Paul's the one who took Christianity to the Gentiles. James, they called him Jesus' brother, I think was adamantly against it, wanted to preserve more Jesus's focus on Jews. So one can only imagine how 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, how that might have made people feel within the church to feel that God spoke to the Jews and gave them the Torah. Then we got this Christianity, but he's a Jew too, and he's focused on Jews. And then Paul comes, and Paul never even met him, and he brought it to us. We're a problem, and it's something that, whether it's conscious or not, it makes life uncomfortable.
Yeah,
If you look at
one of the problems is that Christianity, early Christianity, I think, I think maybe the consulate in Nicaea or wherever, when sort of stuff was formalized, when Christian doctrine was kind of formalized, and also when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, you know, where is that the mere existence of Jews, as you said, is a thorn, is an insult to the way that is an insult to the way that they formulated Christianity. I mean, Christianity didn't have to be formulated that way. It could have been formulated as, hey, we got our way, the Jews have their way, and we can all live together, you know.
If they would have been creative, they and Islam would have been creative and just made their own religion without basing it on us, life would have been a lot easier.
Yes.
If you look at text 10, this is this idea. This is from the Rabbi, saying, Rashi explains that those who hate you means those who hate the people of Israel. Why? Because the deep-seated hatred of the one who spoke and the world came to being is indeed not prevalent. It's idea to say that a Muslim, a faithful Muslim or a devout Christian, it hates God doesn't make much sense. But the idea that those who hate the people of Israel automatically means that they have a problem with God. The one who spoke and the world came to being, because, like, what did you do? You spoke to the Jews and to us, and where do we fit in here? And how are you running this world, and why are they still around? And let's let me just see where we are here. A second. I'm sorry. And if you took till 11a, this is from a Rabbi Greenbaum. He's a rabbi in Australia. He's on the Chabad.org site. He writes that the age-old struggle between Jew and Jew-hater is a misnomer. I remember visiting the Nazi death camp Dachau. How infuriating it was to see at the crematory the large placard dedicating the site to those who died in the fight against Nazism. Said, that's not what's going on. It's us fighting the Nazis? It was a struggle between us and the Nazis? No, the memorial might be somewhat appropriate for the political opponents of the regime who suffered and died there. But my grandfather's uncle, cousins, and thousands of other Jewish martyrs didn't die fighting anything. As far as they were concerned, they were happy to lead private lives before Hitler and his henchmen came looking for them. To term it a struggle between innocent victim and an executioner is as inappropriate as describing modern-day society's effort to protect themselves from suicide bombers, a cycle of violence. Exactly. October 6th, there was a ceasefire. It was calm. There was, if there was a blockade on Gaza, because there was no occupation of Gaza, that's all baloney, because Israel left Gaza, I think, 2005. There's a blockade in Gaza because they were shooting. All they had to do was live in peace, everything would be fine. So this idea of a cycle of violence or a struggle between two it's a little off, especially when it comes to Nazis. Struggle not between our enemies and ourselves. Rather, God's antagonists attack us as the pawns in the battle against righteousness and godliness. Jew hatred is so ingrained and pervasive that no logical or rational explanation for the phenomenon can possibly be attached, other than to define it as the wicked man's eternal struggle against divinity. And if we look at 11b, that's also from that article, if they're not fighting us, but fighting God, our only viable response is to live and act like Jews, no matter the provocation. When it becomes apparent that their hatred towards us is predicated on our special relationship with God, then it becomes God's responsibility to defend himself from his opponents and enemies and come to our rescue, freeing us to resume our historic mission of representing godliness to the world. So he's saying You see, a little bit of a different thing. He's saying that the Jew represents the struggle against divinity. So the way I'm understanding, because we're going to go further to what this is all based on something the Rebbe addressed, and I spent some time wrestling with it, trying to understand where the Rebbe was going. I'd like to say that there are two possibilities here within humanity. First of all, there are people who aren't anti-Semitic. I don't think my neighbors are anti-Semitic. Maybe they are, but I don't know. We're good. But in the people who have a problem with us, there are people who don't like the idea of God, don't like the idea of religion. Well, you know something? We're pretty much to blame for a lot of religion, because there's us and everything that came out of us. And then there are those who are religious, and the fact that they're religious itself is a problem with the Jew, because why are you there? Why are you the core of my religion? And if God repudiated you, why are you still here? So, my guess is that, let's say, in the Hindu Indian culture, where they don't see Torah or Sinai as a basis, it's much easier to coexist. I got my deal, you got your deal. I'm not a walking contradiction. And in fact, India has been a pretty strong supporter of Israel. And around here, to my knowledge, and I have spent time with the Hindu community, I've spoken for some Hindu get-togethers. There's no sticking points. There's nothing between us. Two people can have different faiths, but it's anti-faith or having a faith based on Jews. That's a problem. They end up with, at some level, a problem with God. And we'll do text 12 from the Rebbe. God's salvation comes because the enemies and haters of the Jews are really your enemies and those who hate you. In other words, if anti-Semites would see that they could antagonize Jews, God's treasure nation, and God would not intervene, that would be a desecration of God's name. Anti-Semites don't know and don't care whether Jews are religious or not. They only know that Jews are God's children. Therefore, the prayer is, arise, O Lord, and may your enemies be scattered, etc. When Jews are openly connected to God, connected in such a way that nothing in the world can weaken their connection, it's plain that those who hate Jews are really those who hate you. Then the prayer becomes relevant. May your foes be scattered, and may those who hate you flee. So this is, I'm sorry, this is what the Rebbe is saying, is that, first of all, the hatred for Jews is hatred for Jews. But there is something to a Jew showing pride in their Judaism that helps to somewhat blunt the venom of anti-Semitism. An anti-Semite tends to be a bully. When a bully smells blood, it empowers them. Remember, in when Malki and I moved here, which was 92, so I was living here in Spring Ridge, and until 94, we bought this property. So I remember I got a call from the director of the Federation. His name was Alan Neidig, and he wanted to know if there had been any anti-Semitic incidents. And I also said, no. My next door neighbor's a Jew. I don't know, nothing. And he said, because in Somerville, there had been swastikas painted, and in Bridgewater, I don't know anything. And I had previously been asking him, this was the summer of 92, now I remember, because I had been asking him to, when we first moved to town, I started focusing on Hanukkah. I wanted some runway time, and we wanted to put a big menorah in Bridgewater Commons. And I was new to town, we were new to town, so I wanted to get some community buy-in, and the rabbis weren't buying it. So I asked the Federation, can I call this a joint Hanukkah celebration of Chabad and the Jewish Federation? I'll pay for it, I'll put it up, I'll take it down, you don't have to do anything, I just want permission to put it on a placard. And he said, we don't do that kind of thing. Okay. But now in this conversation, he said, I don't understand. Because he himself had somebody, I think, drew a swastika on his door. He said, I look normal. I don't even know how to know I'm Jewish or what I do. You're a target, you walk around it all over. Why are they coming after me? And he was wishing it. He said, I just don't understand these people. And I said, I can't explain what goes on in anti-Semitism. He said, but if you think about it, what's he going to do? He's going to come remind me I'm Jewish? Go find someone who might feel uncomfortable with it. And say, I know you're Jewish. And the son says, I'm so nuts. I'm walking around with this. He's not going to get in with me. He's going to say, you tell me I'm Jewish. I say, yes, absolutely. Can I give you gefilte fish? What's he going to do? And he said at that time, Alan said, I said, I think it's time for some in-your-face Judaism. Count us in for the menorah. And we did, as long as we had the menorah in Bridgewater Commons. That always said Federation too. But my point is that, do I see anti-Semitism? I do. Have I experienced a lot of it? I haven't. I must tell you, I really haven't. I went to Jewish schools, so I didn't have what some people said. In public school going on. I get that. But frankly, I get looks. If I walk into a place where I'm not known, if I walk into a supermarket, less now, but certainly for years, I'd hear the "Stop staring, Jason." But people look. I get it. But you think people walk by me and sneer or say something? Never happened. It's never happened to me. Baruch Hashem. It's a good. Do I think there are no anti-Semites? No, I don't think there are anti-Semites. I'm sure there are anti-Semites. But it's not, and God, I said it, I hope it doesn't start today. But Baruch Hashem, it's up until October 6th for sure, this is a country that prided itself on tolerance. And unless a person is a person with really very low morals, they're not going to show their intolerance so openly. And I gotta say, it didn't happen to me. Yeah.
The logical fallacy, though, in this entire argument is the fact that anytime a group sees what they consider as people among them who are different or encroaching, attack them. I mean, it doesn't have to do necessarily with God. It has to do with different.
So dislike of the unlike is a common principle. I think that it's actually, from my perspective, and I think from a perspective of those who have studied it, that doesn't explain anti-Semitism, because there are people. If it's dislike of the unlike, I should be the target. Here, I remember a woman. She's moved out. She looks Italian. She has Italian last name. She's actually Jewish, married to an Italian guy. She lives in Bernardsville. Got to know her very well. And I remember her telling me, she said, as soon as people found out that I was born Jewish, a wall went up. I said, why? You celebrate Christmas. You're not raising your kids Jewish. Why? Said, I have no idea. You want to call this like a unlike? I don't think so.
Yes.
It's not unlike.
It has been defined more clearly in the past 2,500 years, no question. But the issue has always been there.
I beg to differ. I don't think it's calling this like it unlike is simplifying it and it just doesn't match up, because people aren't unlike. Was Madeleine Albright unlike? She was like, people didn't know. She said she didn't know she was Jewish. But as soon as that came out, she became a target.
Secretary of Homeland Security's Jewish. Mayorkas.
I know that. I hope that everybody else knows that.
No, it's like, and I saw this in the Jerusalem Post, people are saying, well, the reason why people are trying to impeach him is because of anti-Semitism.
Okay, I don't believe that at all.
I don't
And
know.
maybe some people. I don't
I
believe
was surprised to see that in the.
it. I don't think it's because it's a contentious immigration issue and he's the face of it. I don't know.
Why the Jerusalem Post?
I think that, and I don't like that. Why throw in the Jewish factor? Let's look at the key points. Yes, ma'am.
Probably a childish question.
No such thing.
But I'm going back to what Rabbi Greenbaum says on page 116.
Yeah.
Because when it becomes apparent that their hatred toward us is predicated on our special relationship with God, then it becomes God's responsibility to defend himself from his opponents and enemies and come to our rescue.
Right.
Hello, where's the rescue? Where is the rescue for all those hostages? Where's the rescue for the people who were slaughtered? Where's the rescue for the people who were
Right,
in concentration camps?
so that's a great question. I think what he's doing is he's paraphrasing the Rebbe. The Rebbe's approach was he was very demanding of God. He wasn't God's defense attorney. And not that he didn't think that God has been very good to the Jews also, simultaneously as Jews suffering. But so what he's saying is this is a call to God. Protect yourself by protecting us. He's not saying we see it. He doesn't say we see it. It becomes God's responsibility to defend himself. He's not saying he sees God defend himself. And the Rebbe would often he would cry, and he was like publicly challenging God. I heard it a number of times, standing right there, saying that where are you? Not doubting that God's there. Not asking, not where are you? Let's see you. Show yourself. And that's really in the Rebbe's talk, it's in 12 also. The Rebbe was guiding this to a blessing for us, that God should see that this challenge to the Jewish people is a challenge to him and act on our behalf. Because we're taking the brunt of what's directed at him. That's what this is meant to do. That's what he means to say. Not that he's claiming that we can see God's defense. Been a lot of problems, and you're right. Look what's going on now. At the same time, I believe that God cares about me, and I believe that cares about everybody, and certainly cares about the Jewish people, and God is there for us. We still have questions.
But why did these things keep happening?
And that's part of one of the reasons we ask for Mashiach, for a better world. It's not there. Unfortunately, there's no answer to that why. There's no and then it would say that too. So that maybe it's supposed to remain like a nagging question. So that we need a better world. Even if I'm doing well, I have to recognize the world's not necessarily doing well.
It's an extremely difficult question, but
Yep.
If I can throw my 2 cents into the pot.
Sure.
In the Torah, and even before the Torah, Hashem gave humanity the ability to distinguish right from wrong. And he left us with that wonderful tool. And it's so dissatisfying. And I suppose it's so easy for me to say because, I'm the children of people who never had to run from the Shoah. They were here in America, but before it all happened. And so my experience and my family kind of lore is not the same family experience and what people grew up who were children of survivors. And so it's probably easy for me to say, but there are also, and I'm fascinated to read almost every week in Aish HaTorah. There's stories of many people, most of them Jews, many of them non-Jews, who went out of their way, really put their lives on the line to save some of us. Now, not enough, God only knows.
Yeah.
But there are stories of heroism, people who absolutely knew right from wrong and who were willing to put their lives on the line. And I think that is, I mean, and so the spark of Hashem that was in them came through, was very much present. And so I'm not sure what form Hashem is anymore. You know, does Hashem live, you know, in every one of us? Is there a spark of holiness in everybody? And we have to pray, God willing, that spark is touched when we see horrible things happening, and we have to pray and hope that spark will respond to horrible things and save people, rather than there being one overall creative force that can change the entire course of human stupidity into human love and intelligence.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Jonathan.
It's easy for me to say. It's easy for me to say, you know.
There any other questions?
Key points.
What?
Did we read the key points or did we get it sidelined?
Do you want to read the key points? We can do that. Key points are, number one, a sonne in Hebrew means a hater, is someone who harbors a deep obsessive hatred. Number two, when the Torah speaks of a sonne of God, again, a hater of God, includes a hater of the Jewish people. For someone who hates Jews, really hates God. Again, if in that manifestation of it. Three, there's no rational explanation for anti-Semitism. The usual reasons presented are absurd and often mutually exclusive. Number four, because hatred of Jews is really hatred of God, the correct response to anti-Semitism is to reinforce our connection with God. In doing so, we clarify who the battle is really against and invoke his protection. Okay, wish you all a great week, unless there are more questions. See you next Sunday.
Just one question, a technical one. How can we access the slides on this presentation today?
The slides or the video?
The
slides that we just looked at?
Yeah.
I can send it to you. I can send it.
I appreciate that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, be well. Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good day, Rabbi. Thank you.
You too, bye-bye.
Yeah.